what I'm asking myself, what would need to be overcome when someone has a cultural background, right? In order to what is it that needs to be overcome? I don't understand what needs to be overcome here. It's a cultural background, right? It's part of who you are as a person, as an individual. So
Hot Shoe Productions has been holding conversational roundtables throughout the year. We want to amplify the voices of communities that are Black, Indigenous, and people of color who continue to advocate for change. Welcome to another episode of the documentary series, Advocacy as Education. In this episode, we had the privilege to bring together 5 different community leaders.
My name is Gabrielle Fayant.
I'm Emmanuel, Duala, Ekoko.
greetings, my name is Jamaal Jackson Rogers.
My name is Tyler Kumie Boyce.
Hi, my name is Alia Farhat.
They have a conversation about the challenges of transitioning from youth to adulthood based on questions that we provided them. Each participant scales their answer from 1 to 10. Whoever ranks it the highest and lowest justifies why, and the other leaders can pitch in for more insight.
It's between the both of them. They both wrote 5.
Yeah, I think I strongly agree that I've heard this a lot in the communities, and I think it, to some extent, it limits the potentials of youth because they usually do not feel included when they feel maybe their backgrounds or their way of doing things, where they come from, is shown us. Like, for example, young Black guys are agitative or they are energetic. So maybe the fact that we would like running or we are too active physically in the way we respond or react, coming from maybe a cultural perspective, it's usually seen as disruptive or something usually attached to it, which makes it a huge limitation to how we carry ourselves and how we view ourselves in public. Yeah, so I strongly agree that I've heard this a lot as a young Black guy. Yeah.
That's a great point. I was looking at this, and it's the word often, I think, that made me bring this down, because I definitely agree that, there is a kind of narrative that cultural backgrounds need to be somehow tempered or kind of leveled so that people can feel either more confident in an environment that their cultural background might not be the norm. But at the same time, like, the often is what caught me, because even though I notice it, and that's because of my awareness, I think that it's really hidden. And so when something is hidden, like it's institutionalized, really being framed as a barrier that needs to be overcome, it's hidden. You can't sometimes see it or feel it. So in that undisclosed framework that I guess systems try to remove, the richness of cultural backgrounds, it's sometimes hard to identify it. And because of that, you won't see it so obvious as such, right? And so I feel like, as much as it's definitely an asset to have your own cultural background and express it. It's who's creating these frameworks is what I'm asking. Like, who's creating this framework that it needs to be overcome, right? And I feel like when you think about who's creating the framework, it's usually not the people who have that diverse cultural background. It's individuals who are the ones in power, or who make the rules in the system. So the only reason why I put it right in the middle is because I think that while there is a narrative, right, that the diversity of cultural backgrounds is a barrier that needs to be overcome, there's also a responsibility on the other side too of the individuals to continue to carry that, right? Especially in the face of what might not be so obvious, like because what what I'm asking myself, what would need to be overcome when someone has a cultural background, right? In order to, what is it that needs to be overcome? I don't understand what needs to be overcome here. It's a cultural background, right? It's part of who you are as a person, as an individual. So overcoming something, maybe they mean cultural. In this case, could it be like economic background, right? That could be overcome, but a cultural background. If it's maybe related to war, right? If you're coming, your background comes from a place of conflict, right? There's a lot of conflict in the places you're from. Maybe there's things to be overcome there in terms of individually in that person, but who's to say someone else has to tell you it needs to be overcome? How does that even work? So yeah, that's I kind of put it right down the middle because controlling your own narrative is really important.
So I basically just put 5 because it's like such a big conversation. Like exactly, like it depends like who's asking this question too. It could change. But just like from my perspective, I don't believe that assimilation is ever the answer. And like I even like see like when people first come to Canada, they're often forced to like assimilate to like whatever quote unquote Canadian culture. I don't even know what Canadian culture is. I don't like, is Canadian culture colonization and capitalism? I don't know. But you know, folks are often asked to like assimilate to this, like speak English. And I often tell people like, whatever you do, don't do that. You know, like we've been, like our languages have been stolen from us to make way for like this new Canadian culture. Like, please, like keep your cultures alive. I feel that also, you know, all of our unique cultures, it has like stories and richness and even instructions for us on how to live in a good way. Like even when you learn the languages of different lands, the languages always tell stories of how to take care of the land. But what's happened through colonization is like wiping away all of that language and all that history to build condos, you know, and development and resource extraction. And so I always just, yeah, like, so this question was kind of like messing with my mind. But I always believe in like, you know, keeping cultures alive. And I don't believe that cultures are barriers. I believe that systemic racism is the barrier, you know, which tries to remove culture. So.
But one thing I want to add is that I also hear it like a very different narrative in my own household. And I don't hear that our culture is something that needs to be overcome. And I don't hear that our culture somehow makes us weaker and less capable to succeed in society. Like in the way that I was raised, it was always that our culture is something that teaches us to live life in a way that is in line with balance, with goodness, with being able to carry the values from our family and from our culture into the ways that we interact with people and that we interact with the world around us. So my culture was really ingrained with me at home as like this asset, this like powerful little superpower you have as like a young queer East African, like be able to take that into the world. So I put an 8 because yeah, in this country, this place that's this colonized legacy of a land that we live in, where our difference is always going to be framed as a weakness. But in the homes that we come from, I think it's important that we to also bring into this conversation that our difference, our culture is framed as something that gives us the strength to stand as Black people and as Africans, no matter where we are in the world.
But I think it's up to the youth, because growing up, like I always had ties with like the Somali background. There's a basketball group that like started hijabi basketball, I could say, and it's like grown to 92 girls who come out and play, right? And it's like that, the sharing of that social and cultural background of like the simplicity of just like wearing the hijab, right? Brought an opportunity for a group that was not, I wouldn't say lost, but like couldn't find like a networking opportunity because of their differences, right? So that's kind of like why I wrote a 6, sorry, just because of like who is the barrier for, and it all depends on your perspective of like what group you're with or associated with as well. So yeah.
I think going last sucks because I was looking at it. Okay, we're good. Okay. That's a good question.
So a university degree can help you get a good job if that's what your goal is. I think that as an entrepreneur myself, and as someone who has a family, so I have dependents that I take care of and I maintain. I did post-secondary degree education, and after that, I discovered it wasn't what I studied. I didn't. It was useful for me in a certain time of my life, but it wasn't where the trajectory of my life where I wanted to go. Now I try to teach people the opposite. University degrees do not define good occupations. Good occupations are defined by the impact and the effect that occupation has for your life. So if you recognize that the occupations that you can acquire from going to university and college will have the effect and impact you desire for your life, then go for it. But the status quo of university and college and any other post-secondary studies being the definition of what can offer you, I guess, stability and success in your occupation, I totally disagree with that. I think in fact it's somewhat of a hoax, personally, and I'm speaking as an entrepreneur. I think it's a major hoax. It's tied into capitalism. It's tied into modern day, servitude and submission. From my own personal lens, it doesn't mean there's no good in there. There's learning in there, and learning is good. There's growth in there. There's education involved. But when a system when the roots are corrupted in a system, for me personally, I don't care if there's some good in it. If the soil is eroded and corrupt, then I would rather pay my attention to something else that doesn't have that type of corruption, because it's only a matter of time before some of your life or some of what you're doing starts to get impacted by that. And I've looked into the whole idea of privatized university and post-secondary, and I've seen who's funding. Like, for example, there's some schools you go there and you're learning, but then you find out about the system and how it works. Like, you can't protest certain things, but then the other things you're seeing protests, you're like, that's fair to be protested, but you can't speak up out about this, or you'll lose your, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. Yeah. So I have an issue with universities, which is obviously major institutions across the world, touting themselves as the place to be for your life when they're tied into so many other things that I disagree with. But when it comes strictly to the schooling and what you're going to get from that, all my children, I'm telling them to take 3 years off when they're done high school. I'm encouraging, if they want to go for it post-secondary, but I'm telling them take 3 years off, build some other skills, maybe entrepreneurial skills if you want, then go into university or college, mature than everybody else, clean up house, and then if that's what you want, and then get out. But I'm not really a big sponsor, proponent of going to university and college anymore, even though I did it.
Yeah, I also wrote too, because that's the first thing I wrote was like, what defines a good job? Yeah. And I was born in Ottawa, but even so, my parents who sacrificed, left for war to come here, like a good job is considered like a doctor, a lawyer, something that's going to be able to suffice financially to raise a family, right? But then as myself, who's gone into something of that profession, as an architecture practice, right? I see university as a way of regulating ideologies or regulating a certain standard. For example, the construction industry, right? I see there's risk and liability to that, obviously, in that profession, and same with a doctor. But then there's also natural medicines and holistic practices, right? So it's what defines a good job? Is it finance? Is it happiness? Is it what defines that itself? And then on the other side of the question is is it necessary, or the range of roles and salaries available? It's you're an entrepreneur, right? If you have your own business, your efforts kind of dictate your final product. Whereas university, it'll give you a degree, and it's a starting salary based on another entrepreneur, right? Essentially, it's an entrepreneur who has the business to provide you a job, right? So university won't necessarily teach you communication skills, won't teach you to network, right? It's a platform that could maybe help you network because it's a group of individuals in one location, kind of within more or less the same goals of kind of graduating or going on the same journey. But for example, I graduated with my undergrad in architecture. Unfortunately, I have to go back to do my master's to become licensed because that's just how it's structured. But I didn't get my job because of my grades or my portfolio. It's because of my networking growing up. You know, like I knew my basketball coach who was my mentor coached another girl whose father and mother were architects. And that kind of led me in. So I think like networking and like getting to know one another and having those entrepreneurial skills and leadership is what gets a quote unquote good job, right? And what you would like. Like university is more or less teaching the working class, right? It's trying to produce a working class, and that's kind of when you look back at history, that's how universities kind of started. Is like ideologies for a standard, right? Everything was became more scientific, and there's like a right way of doing something. But nowadays, especially with like social media and like the internet, like you no longer need like you can go on YouTube and learn how to cook. Like you don't necessarily need university, right? So that's why I kind of put it to, because of the resources out there with media, as well as the skills that university won't teach you that will essentially land you a job, right?
Okay. Yeah, I think what she said, that was very good as well. And I think for myself, I graded it a 5. And I did grade it a 5 because university is important. It's important because it helps you realize you're an adult. That's the stage where you actually realize adulthood kicks in the university. But away from that, it's a growing up stage. Many people miss that process of it and focus too much on the schooling. And if you focus too much on the schooling, you get stuck in school. So you finish and get a job, regular job. But if you focus on fulfillment in life and finding your path, forging yourself, if you look at the most successful people, they dropped out from university because in that stage, they found themselves. So that could be an eye-opening place to know how to define yourself, how to forge your path. I did a lot of university studying. I did CCNA, Cisco Computer Networking. I didn't like it. I did political science and public administration, a bachelor's degree. I hated it before I could even finish it. And the 4th year going, I did social service work. I did coaching too. It was a bit too political when you actually do it, so I didn't like it. So, but I came here, did social service program, tried to work with some organizations, working for someone, like she said, you're working for an entrepreneur who has his own goals defined. So you are only helping them achieve their goals. So is that fulfilling enough for you? See, for someone, getting a job is total fulfillment. For someone else, doing what makes them happy is what fulfillment is. For someone else, it's a salary. So looking at different roles and salary ranges, I could be making 35 grand and I'm maybe shooting my music, shooting my videos, and I feel like this is fulfilling enough for me. I don't need to make 6 figures to compete with someone else. Or so it depends on where you are, where you find yourself, what you find fulfilling for you, and what you think you'll be proud of. You'll be able to put food on the table and makes you sleep at night.
Yeah, like, is a university degree important? I think it's incredibly important. I think for me, like, you know, me and my brothers, we're the first generation to be born in Canada. Like, we're the first generation to be born outside of the continent of Africa. And, you know, we didn't come here because we love winters or because we want to be like supporting the colonial project of Canada as like through immigration policies. Like, we came here for opportunity that was taken from our countries because of colonization. If the opportunities were in Kenya, if the opportunities were in Somalia, we would have stayed there. So when we come here, it's sort of, you know, these conversations about the value of university, they come with you know, a lot of privilege. From us, you know, everything that we're gonna have here is things that we need to be able to work for. We're not inheriting a house, we're not inheriting trust funds, we're not inheriting investments. And, you know, at the end of the day, we navigate the world as Black men. And I can definitely say that university is not the only way towards like having a good job or making a good impact in the world. You can do that and get there in so many different ways. But it's definitely a tool for us to be able to do that. So like, I'll tell you like a story. So we were talking about fulfillment. So how many years ago? Maybe 3 years ago, I was coordinating a regional HIV testing program. It was amazing. I had 6 clinics like across the Ottawa-Gatineau region. I was meeting with people, giving them like that counseling, helping them navigate the health services, letting them know about their HIV status, getting them like the support if from the tests we found out that they were living with HIV, demystifying stigma, creating community for people who are so pushed out from it. And I felt so fulfilled. And then I remember that, you know, in all these conversations I was having, I realized, you know, my manager, my supervisors, my directors, executive directors, research chairs, all these people that I was working for in my career, I felt like I could do that. And I've always been like one of the smartest people in the room in any situation, naturally, but also just because I know that I'm gonna go home and learn something because I always wanna keep learning. So when I left that job to go to school, it wasn't because, or to do my master's, it wasn't because I wasn't fulfilled. But I remember I was walking out of the building and the executive director at the time said to me, wow, good luck, and I really hope you come back and work for us after your master's program. And I looked her in the eyes and said, the only way I'll ever come back here is if I'm the next executive director. And she was shook. And I saw her face drop. And people in this country are not used to Black people letting you know that you're gonna work for us one day. That's a really scary thing for them to understand. And you don't get there without having a master's degree, because in many ways, the way that the world looks at us is already through a lens of deficit. So you don't need to do it through school. Like that was the route that I took, but you need to know that you also don't have the privilege to just say, I don't care about any of the tools around us. I have family back home who can't even afford to go to high school. I'm here with the opportunity to have a subsidized education, even a free education under the last provincial Liberals in Ontario of post-secondary. So to be able to like honor the reason that we came here is to use those tools. And now today, after walking away from that executive director, letting her know that I'm gonna be in that job one day, I'm the executive director of the largest US LGBTQI+ organization in the country. And would I have been able to be an executive director before the age of 30 without having done my master's degree? Would I be able to stand in that role, not just be in it, but lead that role and be able to actually affect change in it without that level of education behind my belt? I don't know. So when we talk about university and what makes a good job, university is one tool amongst a set of tools. But if we're going to tell folks like, you know, that there's other tools available, I think it's having a conversation about what tools you're going to take to get to build yourself to get towards maybe where you're going to be one day. And then on the other side, like what a good job is, you know, like Jamaal was saying, a good job is about the impact that you have in the world. So yeah, the question is quite complicated for me, but it's definitely one where I look and I do want us to be able to have those doors opened for us. And when you come from like a low income or an immigrant background, you know, to get to where you want to be, you're going to have to do things you've never done before. And one of those things is university.
100%. I agree, like informed decision making. Like everybody needs to be able to make decisions with like all the information. And so like I totally support like you like educating your brothers and youth around you. But yeah, it is so individual, you know, like the decision to like go into university, like all these things, what a good job is for you. For me, like I agree that, you know, universities and post-secondary, all these institutions, they're so corrupted. And so like I have a hard time feeling good about myself if I'm putting myself in a place where my values don't align with the values of the organization or institution, which is like often, like I often don't align. So that puts me in like a really like kind of like marginalized situation. And I think for a lot of folks, you know, we just feel like, oh, like I just gotta put my values aside or my morals aside or my beliefs aside to get this you know, salary. And I felt like that many occasions. You know, like I grew up on welfare. Like I'm a high school dropout myself. I've never graduated university, or college or anything. I was always told that, you know, I was not smart enough. I didn't have enough money. You know, I wasn't gonna make it. I was too lazy. All these things, and yeah, and I stuck with it though. Like, it took me a while to really understand that all of these stereotypes that were placed on me, it had nothing to do with being Métis. It had nothing to do with being Native. It had everything to do with the colonizers and what they had done to our families and the trauma that had put onto our families. And once I realized that, like my whole like brain unlocked. And yeah, I've just kind of been known as like someone that sticks to their values. A lot of people see me as like I have a strong integrity. A lot of people say that about me. I'm very diligent, those kind of things. And yeah, I never forget like what the colonizers did to us, you know, and I'm always like on their asses like every chance I get. And yeah, a university degree would have never like put me at this table even. You know, a university degree would have assimilated me, would have narrowed my vision and my scope and put me in a box. But at the same time, like I don't think I ever would have got through university. Like I just learned things totally differently. I have such a hard time reading a book. I love being out on the land though. And so not only can I get through like these colonial ways of doing things, I can skim through them just to get by, but my like spatial awareness, my alertness, I learn all around me, from my smell to my eyes to touch. And like I always know everything that's happening around me, and I would have never learned that sitting in a cubicle looking at a teacher in front of me. You know, and so that's like why I rated it so low. Like university, I just wouldn't have gotten through that. It wasn't made for me. And it probably would have had me sitting in a government cubicle right now, you know, being real unhappy with my life. So that's how I feel about it.